I just saw Caught Stealing with Austin Butler, and I want to talk about it, but I can't because anything I have to say, criticism or complimentary for this movie, would be a major spoiler. So I want to talk about how the 1990s is the hardest decade to do a period piece on right now. Going in, I had no idea that this movie was going to be a period piece. It's set in 1998. Making a period piece is always difficult, and it is notoriously difficult to make a period piece that is less than 30 years old. It doesn't matter when you're making the period piece or what period you're doing, it is hard to erase all traces of the period you are in. Look at Laverne and Shirley. If we didn't tell you this was set in the 1960s, you'd have no idea because it looks like the late 70s. Until the 1990s, every single decade had a very distinct look to it. The 1950s was different from the 60s, the 60s was different from the 70s, the 70s was different from the 80s, and then along came the 90s. Now, this is why the 90s is especially difficult and might be the hardest decade to do a period piece on ever. And we can blame capitalism for it. Despite what you've been told, capitalism does not breed innovation, it breeds sameness. The 1980s is when fast fashion really got started, but it wasn't until the 90s that it really got going with a vengeance. McDonald's locations are a prime example of how capitalism does not breed innovation, it breeds sameness. One of the ways McDonald's makes the majority of their money is by renting the land to their franchises. And if a franchise fails, they want their land to be as valuable as possible. Now, how do they make it more valuable? By making it look like every other building, removing flair and sameness, which is why decades look the same now. The 1990s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s are very different decades aesthetically. But they're also not, because manufacturers figured out the cheapest way to make t-shirts, jeans, skirts, dresses, and they will recycle the patterns over and over into about a 7-year loop. There used to be a 20-year cycle to clothes, and now there's a 7-year cycle because they want us to buy and consume as much as possible. But unlike before, the clothes will not make it 20 years. Due to the nature of the plot of Caught Stealing, they needed a lot of duplicates for everyone's outfit, which is why they wouldn't be able to use actual vintage items, and a movie like this, they wouldn't have justified manufacturing things. So almost none of the clothes in this movie actually look right for the late 1900s. In our newfound 7-year trend cycle, the 1990s is back again! And you can buy jeans and polos and t-shirts with the fit of the 90s, but it doesn't have the quality or the finishes of the 90s. Time is really excellent at giving us a lot of perspective on clothes, but it also has a downside because it makes us lose the finer details, like the fact on Three's Company, they were constantly making fun of Stanley for how he dressed, when to our modern eyes, his outfits look almost identical to Jack's. Take a look at this vintage Guns N' Roses t-shirt. Look for the small details like the thickness of the cotton, the way the sleeve is stitched, and the width of the neck. Now here's a modern Guns N' Roses t-shirt that you can buy at Kohl's. Look at the way it's constructed, the way it's sewn, the materials used, and the fact that it's fake aged. The majority of the fits in the clothing was also just a little bit too modern. They tried to do things like the 1990s oversized t-shirts, but they just tended to get bigger t-shirts, which is not the same thing at all. I'm pretty certain this orange t-shirt is this orange t-shirt that they distressed a little. The costumes in this movie were not bad, and everything they did is completely understandable given the budget that they would have most likely been given for a period piece like this. In 40 years' time, when we have more perspective on clothes and history and are able to zoom in on the details more clearly without being caught up on nostalgia, everyone will think that this was a terrible period piece. On par with Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. With the exception of vehicles, technology, and a few vintage pieces, everything else was purchased brand spanking new and will be very easy for future viewers to see. Alright, my strange little onions, I love you. Have a hug, a cookie, and a juice box. Mwah.